Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Serena Steel, and I am a Secwepemc artist from Simcoe First Nation. My work is quite interdisciplinary, but for this exhibition, it's all based around hand stitching and beadwork. I grew up in around Kamloops, BC, and I moved here in about 2018 to go to school at Emily Carr University, where I got my Bachelor of Fine Arts with a major in critical and cultural practice and a minor in social practice and community engagement, which is a mouthful. All that to say, I went to school for 4 years, did ceramics for 3 years, turned out I'm not very good at it. And then in my last year of university, I decided to take on beadwork as a more serious part of my practice, which is what has brought me here today. This exhibition is called emxwéqsem, which means to tie a knot at the end of your thread. And I came to this title kind of looking through a Secwepemc dictionary, kind of looking through words around beads and needles and threads, and I came across this word, and I thought it was really fitting because tying a knot at the end of my thread is the first step in every project I take and is fitting for my very first solo show. This piece, just a bit of a better view of this one. This one's called Who Do You Belong To? This was my grad project at Emily Carr University and had also been working on it for Beaded Nostalgia at the Bill Reid Gallery. And this was kind of my first big beadwork piece. Prior to this, I had only been working in largely jewelry and earrings and quite small things. And I was really interested in pushing the scale of what I was working on as well as the subject matter. So in the portraits from left to right are my grandma, my mom, and my papa, my grandfather. And I had never done anything like this when I pitched this to my professor. Had never done portraits, had never used color like this before. So it was a really ambitious project for me. And it's all kind of centered around this main idea of belonging. Growing up, going to different community events, whenever I would meet new people, they would always ask me, who do you belong to? Who are your parents? Who are your grandparents? Where do you come from? As a way to kind of try to find a connection between the two and understand like who I was beyond like my name. And I was thinking about it, especially in this time in university where I was often using my introductions as like, hello, this is my name, this is my major, this is where I work. So thinking a bit more deeply about belonging to the land and the people that I come from, my grandparents and my mom being kind of the three main people I feel like I really belong to, as well as the land that I come from in Secwepemc territory, and really considering the relationships I've been building and maintaining over my life and the reciprocity that I think is intrinsically tied to belonging to people and places. I think this is a good first work to start with because I think this kind of sets the tone for the rest of my exhibition and was kind of my turning point into taking beadwork more seriously as a more expansive practice. These are two high needle baskets that I made. The one on the left is a land basket and the one on the right is a sky basket. I had made these out of pine needles. And the first time I made them, well, the baskets themselves I had made probably around 2018 or 2019. I had learned how to do this from a couple different members in my community. I think beyond my like formal art education, I attribute a lot of my knowledge and I guess more casual community-based education to people I have grown up with, to family members and friends who are willing to share their knowledge with me. And this was a workshop I had taken when I was younger, is a pine needle basket workshop. And the baskets themselves have come with me from like home to home and have always kind of been on my shelves. And I've always felt like they needed a little bit something more. And it wasn't until this year that I decided to adorn them with beadwork for this exhibition. On the left, that one has kind of like grass, indicative of the land, and daisies. The daisies will reappear a lot throughout my work. And then the one on the right has some kind of charlotte cut sparkly beads for stars and the sky. Here's a little look at some pine needles on a tree to give you a sense of what the baskets are actually made of, as well as a process shot of the basket itself. So not only is the basket making a labor of love, but so is the gathering of the materials. It takes some time to go out and collect everything, and I think the gathering of materials is often something that's done together as a social kind of family activity for me, which is very sweet. And the way these baskets are put together are, you can kind of see it spiral towards the center. You start at the very middle and you kind of tie the pine needles to themselves, and you work your way bigger and bigger and bigger and add more pine needles as you go. And then you work your way up the walls. And the first basket I made, which was this one, it was a process. It was a lot of trial and error. And the second basket I made, which is the other smaller one, the reason it's so small is because I did it so much better and it took so much longer. So I finished it way quicker. I decided I was done with it. I think the baskets also are important for me because they're such a mundane kind of useful object, and I'm really interested in making kind of everyday objects beautiful and turning things into heirlooms and really making my everyday more beautiful in my home and in my life. This is another basket I made. This one is a birch bark basket. Again, very community-based learning. I believe I made this when I was a summer student working on our cultural team. So they had brought me out and taught me how to harvest cedar roots, which is what is used along the rim, as well as on kind of the bottom you can see where it's stitched together, using it as a thread. And I remember going out with our cultural coordinator at the time, Marissa, and it was so much work, but it was also so much fun because we all went together as a big group. And again, I think the being together out on the land is what makes so many of these things that could be like very labor heavy chores so enjoyable, is because everything is really based around not only relationships with the land, but relationships with each other. And this year, I went out and learned how to harvest the birch bark, because when I made that basket, that was birch bark someone else had harvested and gifted to me to use. But for a part of a different project, I'm learning more about Indigenous medicines and materials. So I've been going home throughout the year and learning about different things as they're in season. And these are a couple photographs of the birch bark harvesting I was learning how to do. So the way that you take the birch bark off is very carefully. You kind of have to score like an I shape, like a capital I shape along the tree, and carefully pry it up. And then once it kind of is pried just the right amount, sometimes it'll just like snap right off. I was not that lucky. We very carefully peeled this off the tree. And the second picture is of my cousin Tiffany kind of oiling it to make sure it's nice and smooth and preserved and easy to roll back up. So I have this at my house, and I need to go harvest some more cedar roots to hopefully make a few more baskets. This necklace is my berry picker necklace. I have two pieces of jewelry in the show. As I said before, I started doing more kind of wall-based and sculptural work. I was working a lot in jewelry and still do. And this necklace, to me, is a bit of a reminder of not only where I've come from, but where I am now. So growing up, I had always gone berry picking with my mom and my aunties and my great grandpa. And strawberries were one of the first things that I learned how to identify as a kid because they're so easy to spot with the white flower and they're so nice and round. And I think every beater kind of has their own style of strawberry in a way, and this is kind of what I've settled on for mine, is a nice, really, really round strawberry with an upward turning leaf. And then in the center, I have a blueberry because my great grandpa, he always talks about picking blueberries with my kia when she was still alive, and he's very picky. There's high bush and low bush blueberries. I can never remember which one is better, but he has very strong opinions on it, and he will not eat one of them. And then on the very left is a salmonberry, kind of thinking about, because they're so abundant here on the coast, being on this land that I am now. And I think I've connected with so many people who are from here, and it's kind of indicative of my relationship to where I am now and the people I've met here. This is my other piece of jewelry in the exhibition. Um, this one is a lilac fringe. This is a pair of earrings that I had made a couple years ago, and the florals themselves, like the petals and the leaves, are made from caribou fur that has been dyed, and I'll talk a bit about that after. But this piece, something, I don't keep much of my own work, my own jewelry and my own artwork. I often gift it away, or it makes its way to other people's hands, which is the way I think it should be. But something about these ones I really resonated with. Lilacs come up later in my work as well. Growing up, my mom had all of these lilac bushes just lining the sides of our yard, and they're so like fragrant when they're blooming, and they're so beautiful, and it's just had become a really important part of my home for me that I didn't realize until I moved here and realized there's like not lilacs here at all. So this is a bit of a reference to my home, as well as I think was a good lesson for me in accepting imperfection in my work. Um, it's a small thing and literally nobody else cares but me probably, but just on the one fringe there's one little dangle that's slightly too long. It drives me nuts every time I look at it. But it was a good lesson for me in not only letting things be how they are, but also working more intuitively with my work. When I had done each of these little fringe pieces, I had counted out the beads exactly in each row, thinking, oh, the circle curves, the beads will curve, it'll all be even. I was more focused on it being like technically all the right length, that when I finished it, I realized I should have just broken that one bead off, and have since learned to work a bit more free flowing with the things I'm making. This piece is titled Good Morning from My Mom's Front Steps, and this comes from a memory of living at home, again with the lilac in the background of the bear. I had woken up one morning earlier than my mom, which was very unusual. She's such an early riser. And I was in the living room and I had heard someone blaring their horn out front of our house, which was so strange because we lived on the reserve and it was so quiet. And it was just like very out of character. And I went to go reach for the doorknob to open it to see what they wanted. And something just told me to stop. And I stopped and I like peeked out the window instead. And leaning right against our front step door was this big black bear. And I was like, oh my God, had I opened that door, that bear would have tumbled right into our home. My mom's asleep. I don't know what I would have done. So in the moment, I was like, oh. But in hindsight, I think it's really kind of turned into a bit of a silly piece, thinking about like every time after for like so many weeks peeking out the door to make sure there were no bears hanging out in our lilac bushes before I exited my home. And there's a bit you can see kind of in the background of the green, those are gold beads kind of raying out, and that's kind of just indicative of the sun because it was the morning time in my story. And this piece has kind of taken a couple different forms. I think a few of my pieces have transformed over the years, like the baskets had changed shape, and then this had started out it had started out just as the bear. It was a patch that I was going to sell, and then I felt really emotionally attached to it, so I couldn't do it. So I framed it and had shown it at the Gallery Gallery for Beaded Nostalgia in a smaller, different frame. And when I had framed it that time, it didn't have those green beads on the edge. I had just framed it so you couldn't see that it was unfinished. And then when I decided to reframe it for the show, I opened up that frame and like kicked my past self for not finishing this piece. So that got updated this year with the green edging across and a bit of a bigger frame to let it breathe. This guy has also turned into a sticker, so he lives in many places.
He lives on my beading piece. I see it all the time.
He lives on a lot of people's like planners, water bottles, notebooks. I think it's sweet. He's living a good life out there. Oh, and I think this one's sweet because growing up I lived on a road that translates to like Black Bear Road. So a little bit of a sense of home in that way as well. And this piece, this is my first of 3 kind of small embroidery hoop pieces. This was the first one I made. After I had made my Who Do You Belong To piece, I found out that I really enjoy beading text, which I think is maybe an unpopular opinion. It is so difficult to get it nice and clear and straight, but it feels really satisfying when you can do it right. And this piece is kind of a reflection on the people I love and the way we care for each other. And I think especially this is just something that I've heard from so many people and I've said to so many people. And it's just one of those small things that is a way to say, like, I care without really saying it. And this piece got like a small story update this year. It was in the exhibition for sale, and one of my high school friends, we were best friends in high school, she came and seen the exhibition, and she had bought it because it really resonated with her, because this was something like we particularly used to say to each other all the time. So it was a really nice moment to reconnect with her, and I'm so pleased that this is going to be in someone's home who is so dear to me. This is my second kind of small embroidery hoop piece. It's called I Picked These For You. As I mentioned earlier, the wild strawberry is so small and round. I've added a couple photos for reference. This one is thinking a lot about being on the land with people I care for and kind of the reciprocity and generosity that comes with these acts of labor. I find often we'll go out and pick like ice cream buckets full of berries, which is the best berry bucket if you ask anybody. And you come home with buckets full of these, and so often you end up just gifting away so much of what you've picked. So not only the labor that goes into the act of it, but the love of sharing it. And I had seen my mom last week, and she was talking about how she literally just went berry picking. She had brought berries to me from Kamloops all the way to Vancouver, and she was like, here, I went berry picking last week. I picked these huckleberries for you. And I was like, Mom, this is going to be a great talking point at my working study this week. So I thought it was really sweet, and she had gifted some to my great grandpa because he can't go out berry picking anymore because he's like turning 95 this year. he's still incredibly active. Like, nobody's ever gonna stop him. But he always talks about berry picking with my kia and how he always wishes he could go out berry picking more. And so she dropped them off, and he always uses them to make jars of jam and canning. And then he takes the berries that he was gifted and canned and then re-gifts that to so many other people. And it's become such kind of a silly thing that happens every time I go home and I see him. I cannot visit him without leaving with like a flat of canning. And then I bring it to Vancouver and I redistribute it here. It's becoming a whole empire. But I think just like the through lines of all these different acts of generosity that have spread so far throughout my life. This one is Gone Fishing. This one, first and foremost, is kind of just my version of a classic Gone Fishing sign because I think it's fun and silly, and fishing has always played a really big role in my life. Growing up, I had always gone fishing with my papa, my grandfather, and I remember one time he came to our house early in the morning and he asked if I wanted to go fishing the next day, and I said, no, I don't really feel like it. And again, probably a couple days later, he stopped by, said, do you want to go fishing tomorrow? And I said, no, I don't really feel like it. And then after that second or third time, my mom stopped me and said, he really wants to spend time with you, and if you stop saying yes, he's going to stop asking. And I think that really changed my perspective on kind of that fishing wasn't just fishing, and it was something to spend time together. And he's so caring in his heart, but he is such like a gruff man on the outside. Like, in no world would he be like, I want to hang out with you today. Like, this was his way of asking to spend time with me. So we did, like every year we'd go to fishing derbies. He was very nice to me, even if I outfished him. He would pick me up so early in the morning and buy me a breakfast sandwich as a reward for being up at like 5 a.m. And even now as an adult, when I visit home in the winter, we'll go ice fishing on the lake, and it continues to be something that we do together. And the fish that I had beaded is a rainbow trout, and this is just an image of some rainbow trout probably a couple summers ago when we had gone fishing together. This piece has really, really taken many forms. It started out as just like the fish piece with a piece of leather that I was going to use to like hang it on my rear view mirror or maybe my wall, and then I was like, this is too simple, I don't like it. And then I tried to turn it into a necklace. I spent a whole day putting together this necklace, taking it apart, trying so many different variations of it. And then I was like, I don't think I like it. But I was like, I'm going to sleep on it. I've made rash decisions in the past. I'm gonna let it simmer. And then I woke up the next morning. I was like, no, I still hate it. So I had taken it apart again. But briefly, it was a necklace. It was half a necklace. You can't see, I didn't do the other half. That's why the photo's cropped that way. So this fish has transformed into so many different things as well. But the way it ended up as a gone fishing sign, I think, is what it was meant to be. And I think a bit of a lesson in letting my work lead sometimes and not trying to force it to be what it is so clearly not. This one is a clover portrait. It is a lino cut print I did in university. I had taken like one printmaking class. I made this. I watched all my friends make huge, intricate things. And I was like, you know what? One and done, I think. And then to make it more fun, I decided to add beadwork on it. This is based on a photograph of my grandparents, who are also in my other portrait piece. And I had adorned it with these daisies, again reappearing in my work in all these fun colors. And this was kind of based off of a memory I have of spending so much time at their house when I was young, because we've always grown up really, really close, and I'm so grateful for that. And me and my cousins would go over and visit and have sleepovers so often. And they always had a lawn that was just so full of clovers. So we would spend so much time outside trying to find 4-leaf clovers. Sometimes if we were lucky, 5 or 6-leaf clovers that I have pressed in a book somewhere in my house. Trying to find ladybugs, kind of just spending time together trying to find these little pieces of luck. So I had made this, and the daisies are a stand-in for a clover because I didn't want to make clovers to be so real. But this is actually from a set of 3 prints that I had made. So the other 2 make more sense as clovers. So contextually, the first one is a bit more clovery. The top one is pressed clovers that I had found with a couple 4-leaf ones, and this one lives in my grandma's house. I gave it to her for her birthday. And I had borrowed it back for this, which was at the Billerud Gallery. I'd borrowed it back for this, and she said, okay, you can borrow it, but just make sure I get it back. And she had messaged me a few times while the show was still up, being like, I'm still going to get that back, right? I was like, yes, Grandma, I'm not stealing your print that I gifted to you. You will have it back. And then the bottom piece is just another kind of lino cut stamp I had made. And if you look in the picture, you can see that I still wasn't happy with it, so I added watercolor. They've changed so much. So those 2 live at, the 2 on the bottom live at my home, and the one on top lives at my grandma's house on her wall. And then here is the photo it was based off of. That's my grandma and Papa. I really like this photo because they're wearing matching jackets, which I think is so cute, and they're holding coffee cups, and something about the photo is just so warm to me, like the way my Papa is looking at her. And I had just talked to my mom yesterday, and I said, do you know where this photo was taken? Because it does not look familiar to me. And she said that they had chaperoned my mom's youth group trip when she was young, and they were in Bella Coola. So I thought it was really sweet, thinking about like my mom's childhood and their presence in her life, and my childhood and their presence in my life. So that's this one. These ones are my mini moccasins and my mini mittens. The moccasins, I've always wanted to make like a real human-sized pair of moccasins. I've not done it yet. You'd think after like looking at some of my other work that I would be confident enough to do it. I'm so scared. It is my most fearful project. I will do it one day. I will get there, but I'm not there yet. So probably last year, the year before, me and my mom were teaching a workshop together, and we had a bit of downtime, and she had made these mini moccasin kits. So she was showing me how to make them, and I was like, that's so cool. I'm going to make a little pair. And I had put strawberries and the little strawberry flower on the mitts later on to match. But I put the little strawberries on the leather, which is a huge pain. Beading directly onto leather hurts so bad. So even just after I had finished doing just the decorative piece before I even assembled anything, I was like, my gosh, I don't know if I'm ever going to make a pair of moccasins. And then I had sewed them all together, and I was like, these are so cute. I don't think I can make a big pair. And then later on, I had decided to make a pair of mittens to match. Again, kind of thinking about everyday objects, especially useful objects. I think in a time where everything is so quickly produced and quickly discarded, thinking about heirlooms again and actually using these beautiful objects until they're no longer useful. And in that thinking, I will make a pair of moccasins. I so badly want to, and I will. But these are my stand-ins for now. I was talking to somebody at my opening, and they said they're moccasins for little people.
Mm-hmm.
And
I thought too. as soon as I saw it.
And if you don't know, it's kind of like in native, I don't know if legend's the right word, but like if you ever have things that go missing, disappear in your house, you blame it on the little people. It's the little people. They stole your wallet. They misplaced your keys. So maybe these moccasins and mittens will appease them, and my life will smooth out a little bit. And if you look at the color of the two here, the leathers look pretty similar. They did not start out that way. The moccasins had originally been on a rope like this, and they were hanging in my car in the rearview mirror for a while, and the sun completely bleached them. They started out so orange and turned into the same color as the mittens on the other side there, which is interesting thinking about, I think, materials and how they change over time. And this time it was a bit serendipitous because this white leather was way easier to work with, and I really did not want to use the orange leather again, so it all worked out for the best. But you can see a bit in the photo how little the mittens are, and it was fun to kind of learn how to pattern things out, especially, I know I talked to a couple of you earlier saying I'm not a sewer, like a machine sewer, so I have like not that much experience patterning out clothing items and things like that, so this was a fun experiment for that one. This is my first set of rearview mirror dice. I had been thinking a lot about the things that people keep in their car and the way people really personalize their car. I think it's so much fun. And growing up, my mom always had like a braid of sweetgrass in her car. My dad always had like the little tree black ice air freshener in his car. Thinking about the different objects that I associate with different people in my life, and kind of wondering, I was like, what's my iconic car symbol gonna be? And so I was thinking about these like really iconic like fuzzy dice that you see everywhere, and I thought it would be really fun to kind of make like an Indigenous version of them. And these were kind of an experiment in construction again, because I had been making so many like kind of flatter objects before this, just to see if it was something I could do, make a like cube. And the reappearance of daisies again. So this was my first pair, and this one is my second pair. And this one, rather than beading and the melt-in wool on the surface, it has caribou fur and leather. And you can see a bit of the construction in my piece in the top corner. So that's kind of how I had assembled all the pieces before I kind of started seaming up the edges and had to flip them inside out and stuff them and all these things. And then the caribou fur it's all different dyed pieces that I had kind of marbled together, and you kind of take like a tuft of fur and tie it down, and it spikes out really big, and then you have to very carefully cut it into a nice round shape. So I did that many times. And it was the messiest project of my life because that fur gets everywhere. Here's a photo of what the fur looks like untufted. And I think all this fur, I didn't dye it, but thinking about all the work that went into all the other people who dyed it, who gifted it to me, or who I bought it from, is just so much labor. So I could make a pair of dice. And then this was the first prototype I did of it. I only made one because I completely misjudged my measurements. It turned out huge, and I thought it was a hazard to be in my vehicle. So that one didn't get a second pair. That one just lives in my home. And then on the mirror, just for a bit of context, so you can see what they look like size-wise. This one is my extra large daisy chain. So I talked a lot about the daisies appearing a lot in my work. It's one of the symbols, along with like the strawberry that appears and reappears. And I think because the daisy, like as a stitch, is one of the earliest things I remember learning as a kid. And it's just so fun and cute and nostalgic that I find myself adding it continuously to everything because I think it's just so sweet. And I don't know, it kind of reminds me of like the roots of learning how to bead for me. So this piece is one of my more recent pieces. I had this idea in my head of just ridiculously big beads because I thought it would be funny and also something challenging to make. Because again, I hand stitched everything and not a big patterner. I spent probably a whole day trying to work out this pattern, doing all the math to make sure all the pieces would fit together, hoping it would be the right dimensions of a bead. And I did the first bead and I was like, oh my god, this turned out so good. And I had like a moment of euphoria where I was like, this is going to be so cool. And immediately I was like, I have to make 6 more. So I spent probably a whole month of my life working just on this project, not even touching anything else. But I think, again, working with scale, I was really interested in kind of thinking about beads as like a big, expansive material because they're so small. And I had initially thought about hanging it like top down vertically, but something about this I really liked as well. Just like the teamwork of the 2 little sides holding it up. And then the little black pieces near the end of the rope are beaded as well to give a sense of scale of the beads I usually use versus the beads that I made. And you can kind of see my process here, all the numbers on my pattern, all the little snips I had to do to make it as round as I could. Sewing in circles is so hard. But this is, I think, one of the pieces that personally I love most, just because it was something fun and experimental, and I've just been really enjoying making large work, I think, because beadwork is often so small. And then this is it installed. I had actually made this piece to be kind of site specific. When I first toured the craft council, I looked at this little corner and I thought, this is going to be hard to make something that looks good in here because it's a little bit dark, it's a little bit inside. So I really wanted to make something that took up the space really well, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I have no idea where it's going to live in my home, but that'll be a problem for later. And back to this piece. I'm going to tell you a secret about this piece. So you're going to get first dibs on this info. It is not done. Charlene doesn't even know this, I don't think. It is unfinished. This is the planning I had initially done for it. Because I talked a lot about belonging to people and the land. I had not gotten far enough to bead the land into it because I needed to show it for my grad project. And then for a while after that, I was like, I just need some buffer time. I can't look at this anymore. It's so big and hard to work on. But this is what it's going to look like one day. It has the strawberry and the flowers again. I talked about that a lot. And then the salmon and the trout, because those are the two kind of fish I had grown up with. And also kind of symbolic of the rivers I grew up around. But you can kind of see the color blocking I did on the people's faces to kind of work out which beads I wanted to use where. And later on, I had considered like the finishes of beads, using more reflective beads for the highlights and more transparent beads where I wanted a bit more dimension. But this is what it's going to look like eventually. I had to take a break from it because often when I talk about my work, I talk a lot about working really intentionally and really trying to put good energy into my work. And this is such an important piece for me because it's of my family and of my home that I really want to make sure I do it right. And kind of my last couple slides are my family. So you can see who I've been talking about for like 40 minutes. This is my mom pointing at herself. every time I've shown this work, I take a picture of her pointing at her portrait. I think it's so sweet. And she always gets a little bit embarrassed, especially at openings, because I think it resembles her really well. So she always gets people kind of like looking at the piece, and if she's standing nearby, like looking at her, looking at the piece, being like, "You look really familiar." So I think that's fun. I showed her this slideshow yesterday, and she was kind of embarrassed that I included this post. But I think it's really lovely. And then these are my grandparents. This is the photo I used as reference for their portraits. I think it's just a lovely, sweet, kind of loving photo of the two of them at one of our holiday dinners. And then these are my great grandparents, my pa'a and my kia'a. My pa'a is unstoppable. Like I said, he's turning 95 this year. He's still gardening, he's still canning, he does puzzles every day. He's been working a lot on language revitalization in our community, and he calls it going to school. So he'll call me a couple times a month and say, well, he always says, "Are you starving yet?" Because I live in Vancouver. And then I'll say no, and he says, "Okay, good. Well, I'm still going to school, so I'm not gonna get dumb anytime soon." Rinse and repeat. That's every conversation we have. I love it so much. And then this is my Kia. She had been a big crafter her whole life too, and I have a few pieces of like jackets she's knitted me, moccasins she sewed me, and I think about her a lot when I'm working on my things as kind of like just the knowledge that has been passed down from her to my grandma, to my mom, to me. Sorry, I paused. Which brings me to my last image here. That's my mom, my Kia, holding me as a baby, and my grandma. Again, just thinking about kind of these 4 generations of women in my life and me, and all the things that I've learned from them and all the teachings that they've given me that I carry forward in my work. And that's all. That is all I have to share.
Okay, so we have 15 minutes for questions. So anybody have any questions for Serena? Okay, Leo?
Hey, first I would like to thank you. It was very inspiring. And I would like to ask you, what is the most difficult part of being a craft artist, in Vancouver in 21st century? What is the most difficult for you?
That's a really good question. I think the hardest part about craft, especially like my craft, is just that it's so slow. And I think it can be hard to try to like keep up with things like social media that demand so much like consistency and time, and like people really profit off of being able to make like a lot of content and a lot of things that are like shareable. So I think that's hard with my craft. Um, Honestly, there are a lot of upsides though. I think the reason I love craft so much is like I talked about going to Emily Carr. I learned a lot about art and the art world, and I met so many lovely people, and I don't regret that time at all. But when I had made the switch in my last year of university to working more on craft rather than like art, it was mostly because I missed like the community that I had built around craft. Whenever I'm working on things, I love working on things together, like at a kitchen table with my mom, or like going to craft nights with my friends. It's much more, for me anyway, craft has been much more of a community-based art than the other things I had been working on in university were.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What was the best part of going bigger in scale? Because it was definitely difficult learning how to do the sewing for larger pieces, but what was your favorite part about getting bigger?
Oh, I think it was genuinely just like seeing it all come together and seeing how much space things were actually taking up. I'm so used to finishing a project and being able to like shove it in a drawer and like never see it again. So it was really nice to have things that take up more space, not only like in a gallery, but in my home. And it was kind of nice to like, let me gather my thought. I don't know, I think it's just been like fun experimenting for me, which is why I think I like beadwork and kind of this hand stitching so much, is because I haven't gotten bored of it. I'm always finding different ways to use the material, whether it's like with color or scale. It's been nice to just be able to change and grow my work that way.
Continuing with the idea of scale, and as a craftsperson, do you feel that because beadwork tends to be small, intricate, and create smaller pieces, do you feel like there is an inherent pressure to create more because of the scale? Do you feel like because things are small, people that don't do the work expect you to create more mass, especially as people are always looking for more and more and more, as you said initially?
Yes, absolutely. I think I won't speak for everyone else, but for me, and I think a couple of my friends who also do beadwork, there's like a constant pressure of like whatever the next thing is going to be, as well as like so many beadworkers I know do like mass amounts of work. They do like 20 pairs of earrings and do like a big drop of earrings at once. And they, like, I know people who do like thematic things for like Valentine's Day, holidays, like Easter, like all these different things, or like the newest pop culture like moment. Like I think there's like a big pressure to like make whatever you're making relevant quickly, which can be hard. Fortunately, I think the people I surround myself with really understand how slow everything is, and everyone's really patient. And I think that's what I enjoy about teaching. I like to teach a lot of workshops because I'll often have people who come to a workshop, and I always preface by saying, you might not finish your project. It's going to take so much longer than you think. And by the end of the workshop, people have a new kind of understanding and gratitude for the slowness and precision of the work. And usually like one person in every workshop at the end of it will go like, thank you so much for teaching me this. I really had a lovely time. I will never be doing this again. Which I think is lovely. So it's nice to connect with like non-beadworkers in that kind of way. I think it helps give a lot of perspective to how much time goes into things, especially like when I tell people most of my work is kind of stitched down like one bead at a time, even just looking at things like that. But there's definitely a demand for more and more and more. And do you have more for sale? Can I buy this from you? Can you make me an order? Like, do you take commissions? So I've been taking a really intentional step back from kind of trying to produce so much for social media and for like the demands of everyone else, and working on kind of, again, like different projects that aren't so sellable or marketable in that way. Like the giant beads is a good example of that. That's not something I think someone would buy for their home because it would be so expensive because of the labor. But I think just trying to make things that aren't so commercialized in a sense. I still do, but it's nice to take a break from it.
Just so you know, my roommate would definitely buy the big over room.
Okay, maybe people would. I think it's just like my mind thinking like, oh, I don't have room for this in my house, which is gonna be. I feel like I can't put stuff in my wall right now.
Of course.
I don't actually have a question, but I just wanted to say it was really refreshing to listen to you talk about the way that your art brings you, because I feel like a lot of times artists feel like they need to be really serious. And I think that what you're doing is way deeper and more important than that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I think joy is like the biggest pillar of my work. Like there's a lot of very serious and important work out there. That's just not my niche. I think so much of my work is just, since it's so family focused, a lot of it is just thinking about the people I love, and I really just enjoy being able to celebrate the places I've come from. So thank you for sharing that.
You mentioned you always like to be doing something while you're beading, or I guess beading while you're doing other things, which I do a lot too, whether I'm weaving or drawing, whatever it is. I usually like listen to a podcast, conversation, and I find that when I go back and look at the work later, I like remember the exact like dialogue in the show, or I remember like how I felt talking to this person while I was doing it. And I was wondering if you experience the same thing, and if that plays into your like themes of memory.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I agree. That's what I was trying to say. Um, I think I really have like strong associations of like acts and like whatever's going on in my life. So I definitely feel that way, especially since so many of my pieces start from like a story I had been thinking about. And yeah, I agree. I think a lot of my work has like started from memory and has also like tied memories into it during the making of it. But I've always been a very like connected, like things just like really spark for me. Like not super related, but especially like songs. Songs will remind me of one specific place I listened to that song in, and I feel kind of similar about my beadwork. Yeah.
Do you are you inclined in any other things like woodwork, or like is there any inclination in your life?
I would love to do woodwork one day. One day when I win the lottery and I own a home and I can build my own woodworking studio, I would love to do woodwork. Um, Really nailed me with that one. Absolutely. Um, I think I do like a few other things beyond beadwork, um, but right now it's mostly beadwork. I would love to. I know I said I've told people before that sewing machines hate me. I would love to conquer the sewing machine one day. I would love to become a quilter. That is not happening for me in the near future. I think also just like a lot of my limitations are like space. Like I can't do artwork and crafts that take up a lot of room in my life because I live in Vancouver and I cannot afford that extra room. Um, but I would love to make a quilt. I would love to build furniture. Um, yeah, I think there are tons of things I would like to try one day. I'm not quite there yet.